Good evening. This is CTV News for Monday, November 27th. I'm Patricia Vallone.
And I'm Denise Douglas. Glad you could join us this evening. We have lost a giant in the legal profession. He is described as a man of integrity and character with a brilliant mind whose passion was witnessed on and off the bench for decades.
And we are talking about Judge William Missouri. He served as the administrative judge in the Prince George's County Circuit Court for more than a decade. He died on November 21st. Now, public officials, friends, and others who knew him say his legacy will not be forgotten.
When I think of Judge Missouri, I think of integrity, character. I think of a man who paved the way for so many of us younger African Americans, attorneys coming along at that time. Judge Missouri was on the district court in 1985. I graduated law school in '86. I believe he became a circuit court judge in '87. So I've known him mostly on the circuit court. And as a young attorney, you appear in front of Judge Missouri, he expected nothing but the best. And he took his time to talk to the attorneys afterwards and say, young man, young lady, perhaps you could have done this better, perhaps you could do this better. And not in a way of chastising you, but in a way of saying, each time you come to court, you have to be the best you can be.
There are no accidents. I was incredibly blessed to be put in the realm, in the sphere of such great people like William D. Missouri, and Wayne K. Curry, and Alexander Williams Jr., and Sheila Tillotson Adams, and Michelle Houghton, and fabulous people, great legal minds. But above those legal minds, these are great human beings. And one of the common denominators that we had in common, in addition to their legal minds, was a passion and a commitment for service. When he became a judge, he inherited the title honorable. But William D. Missouri was always an honorable man.
And services for Judge Missouri will take place this Wednesday at St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Largo.
Okay, so here to talk more about the life and legacy of Judge Missouri is Judge Alexander Williams. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Judge Missouri, considered a pioneer in the field. What would you say his major contributions to the profession were?
Well, Bill Missouri was probably the face of justice in Prince George's County. He clearly was a legend and highly respected in terms of his public service, as well as his running the court system, the Prince George's County Circuit Court. So I have just the greatest admiration for that man, and we're going to sorely miss him.
So he received his law degree from the University of Maryland back in 1978. Back during that time, how do you think he was first received as a young African-American lawyer?
Well, of course, I'm even older than that. I was a young lawyer in the early 70s, and when I first met him, and I remember when he came to the state's attorney's office, he worked for the gentleman who I ran against for state's attorney, Bud Marshall, and I remember him in the office. He was very kind, very honest guy, and hardworking, and once he passed the bar, then he became, as I said, a great prosecutor, as a litigator and advocate. And I don't think he wanted to do anything else other than public service. And talking to Bill across the years, I knew that one of his primary loves and interests was just being a public servant and having the privilege of serving as a judge in Prince George's County. So he was the face of justice, clearly.
Now, in terms of race, though, were there specific challenges that he faced, and how did he overcome them?
Well, in 1978, when he left law school, it was just tough for African-American attorneys in Prince George's County. It wasn't but a few of us there. He had come after we had formed the J. Franklin Bourne Bar Association, but he probably was the only one African-American in the state's attorney's office at that time, so you had to have a special person like Bill Missouri who had been able to adjust to some of the racism and prejudice that took place in the 70s in the legal community at that time. But he was a person that was well liked and well respected, got along with everyone. So he probably was the best person to have in that job at that time. And he set a standard that so many had to follow years later.
So you mentioned that he was one of the first in the state's attorney's office as a young African-American attorney. His actual dates were 1978 to 1985. So what kind of impact do you think it made on that office in the long term? And do you think it made a difference for somebody like Angela Alsobrooks, the current state's attorney?
Well, let me say this. I was actually in that office a few years before that. I actually was an intern in the state's attorney's office in 1973. And for a long period of time, you only had one African-American who was an assistant state's attorney in the office. In 78, I suspect that Bill was probably the only one. May have been one other, but he handled himself extremely well. He understood the pressure of being one or two in the office. He was a local guy that had spent a lot of time in Prince George's County. He went to Bowie State University undergrad, and so he was well thought of, very broad, very wise, and so he handled that job as a young black African-American prosecutor in a mighty way, and we certainly appreciate what he did. And he probably helped counsel not just Angela, who is the state's attorney now, but also Glenn Ivey. Glenn Ivey, who preceded her. I'm sure that he, from time to time, got advice and wisdom from Bill Missouri. I also might add that so many lawyers, young lawyers and young judges in our county and around the state spoke to Bill Missouri and counseled with him from time to time just to get advice. And I personally know that there were a number of judges around the state who were being investigated by the Judicial Disabilities Commission, and they would go to Bill Missouri just to get advice as to what to do and so forth. So he was a giant. He was a mentor and someone widely respected across the state.
If there was one piece of advice that you would say he gave you that stuck with you, what would that be?
I would say to work with all groups of people, all nationalities, people of different races and experiences. That was his strong point. And I got a lot of suggestions from him in that area, particularly when I ran for office in 1986.
All right. Somebody will be truly missed. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Judge Williams.
Thank you.